Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into a question I know a lot of you think about.
Hmm.
How do our cities change, right? And what do we even mean when we say a place feels, authentic?
It's a slippery concept.
Totally. Someone shared some really great thoughts on this, and we've also got this fantastic book, Naked City, The Death and Life of Authentic Urban
It's a
Places.
classic exploration of these themes,
Exactly. So our mission today is to sort of cut through the noise, understand urban authenticity, especially somewhere like New York.
which is maybe the ultimate example of constant change.
Right. How neighborhoods evolve, what drives it, and how this authentic label gets stuck on things. We want to give you a fresh take, basically.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Well, the source material we looked at kicks off with this feeling, almost a lament, for a New York that some feel has kind of lost its soul.
The good old days narrative.
Sort of, yeah. Describing it as a smooth, sleek, more expensive replica of its former self. And the author argues this isn't just like inevitable revitalization.
Suggesting something more deliberate.
Yeah, a determined destruction since the 80s. It's not about missing crime or, buildings falling down.
No one misses that.
Right. It's more a longing for that tangible diversity, the specific smells, the sounds, the little art spaces, the mix of people, that street character.
The stuff that makes a place feel unique, lived in.
Precisely. And interestingly, the author does say, look, you can still find neighborhoods like that, maybe in parts of Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens.
It hasn't vanished entirely, just shifted, perhaps.
That seems to be the point. But then your perspective brings in something crucial, right?
Well, yeah. The whole idea of a city like New York being authentic in the first place, it's almost kind of absurd, isn't it?
Because it's always in flux.
Exactly. It's a
Right.
global capital. Change is its default setting. We even have that term Manhattanization.
Right. I've heard that.
And it usually signifies the opposite of authentic. High rises everywhere, anonymous crowds, paying a fortune for a tiny apartment, fierce competition.
Not exactly cozy and unique.
Not at all. But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The idea of authenticity itself it's changed.
How so?
It used to be more tied to the origins of a place, the people. Then it became about the quality of things, maybe craft goods or local produce.
Okay.
And now, more recently, it's shifted again towards the experience, the curated feeling you get.
So it's something you consume, almost.
Pretty much. Time magazine even called authenticity one of the big ideas back in 2007. And marketing folks were really pushing this shift, focusing on the experience.
That makes sense. And the book picks up on that, right? How this new kind of authenticity gets made.
Yeah, it digs into how it's often produced by new residents, by entrepreneurs moving in.
The ones catering to their own tastes.
Exactly. They see something missing. Maybe it's a really good latte. Maybe it's a certain magazine like Wired, just as an example.
Uh-huh.
And they create a business to fill that void, which naturally reflects their cultural community, their interests.
Which might be quite different from the people who've lived there for ages.
Precisely. And that can clash with, or just replace, the kind of organic character Jane Jacobs wrote about. Then you also have other entrepreneurs who are maybe less about taste and more about the economic opportunity.
Seeing the potential in changing demographics.
Right. They spot a chance. And these new places, think an indie rock bar opening up where maybe a Polish working class bar used to be.
Right.
These new consumption spaces, they actively, reinvent the community. They become the new social hubs.
So the places people hang out really signal who the neighborhood is becoming for.
Absolutely. The book gives that Williamsburg example. Polish residents maybe not feeling drawn to the new indie rock or miniature golf bars.
And vice versa, I guess. The newcomers aren't necessarily going to the old spots.
Exactly. So you see this pattern in the types of music venues, cafes, shops that start to dominate. It really highlights how the social fabric is being rewoven.
And the analysis digs into why this happens, linking it to different kinds of value.
Yeah, it's not just random taste. There are these aesthetic values driving that desire for a certain kind of authentic experience.
Alongside the practical stuff.
Right. Alongside the use values for the longtime residents, the grocery store they rely on, the laundromat, and the exchange values for developers, which is basically the profit potential.
Got it. So aesthetics play a big role for the newcomers.
A huge role. Think about the appeal of those old 19th century buildings, even if they're a bit run down.
They have character, history.
Exactly. Craftsmanship. It stands out against, generic modern buildings. It connects to this idea that today's gentry, as the book calls them, often want things that feel authentic, natural, warm, honest, organic, unique.
Less about flashy opulence, more about curated character.
You got it. And it's fascinating because, when Jane Jacobs was writing, gentrification was still pretty new.
Right, it wasn't the dominant force it is now.
But other thinkers like Herbert Gans, he kind of saw this coming. He predicted that people might get tired of homogenized suburban life.
And want something more.
Yeah, they'd rediscover the charm, or maybe just a simulation of the charm of old ethnic neighborhoods, claiming the history, but maybe conveniently overlooking some of the earlier realities.
So, not actual authenticity, but an achieved version.
That's the key phrase Gans used, achieved authenticity. It implies it's something constructed, chosen, curated.
Gans's idea is quite powerful when you think about it. Foreseeing this return, but not for the original thing necessarily.
Exactly, a return for a version of it, a simulation. It's selective history, maybe, picking the parts that fit the desired aesthetic.
Which might sideline the actual lived history of the people already there.
That's often the tension, isn't it? Whose version of the place gets to be seen as authentic.
And this whole process isn't happening in a vacuum, obviously. The book links it to bigger things, like globalization.
Oh, definitely. Particularly globalization and deregulation starting in the 1980s. That opened the floodgates for foreign investment in New York real estate.
So money flowing in from all over the world.
Huge amounts. And despite, economic downturns, recessions, even something as major as 9/11.
The investment kept coming.
Pretty much, yeah. Foreign investors buying up everything from those big, shiny midtown trophy buildings down to, rent-controlled apartment blocks in the Bronx.
Wow, so global money is really reshaping the city at every level.
It's a massive engine of change. The book really makes you think about how connected global finance is to what happens on your local street corner.
It really does. Okay, so the book then takes these ideas and looks at specific places, right? Public spaces.
Yes, it uses case studies to see how this plays out on the ground, especially when spaces are managed differently, like Union Square.
Which is run by a BAD, a Business Improvement District.
Since the 80s, yeah.
Yeah.
And the interesting point made is that paradoxically, Union Square might feel more like an authentic public gathering space
Okay.
than the World Trade Center site, which is publicly controlled but perhaps feels more, regulated or monumental.
Interesting comparison.
Oh.
What else?
Then it shifts to the Red Oak ball fields in Brooklyn. You've got the Latino food vendors there.
Oh, yeah, they're famous.
Exactly. Their authenticity creates this kind of informal private stewardship of that space, which exists right next door to a giant IKEA.
Talk about contrasts.
Right. And finally, a community garden in East New York. Looking at how that whole movement started as political protest.
Reclaiming vacant lots, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And how it's evolved, now often focusing more on urban food production.
So, different models of authentic places, but none of them simple.
Not at all. They all come with their own conflicts, their own inequalities bubbling under the surface, which really makes you, the listener, think. Navigating your city, what does this messy reality mean for you?
That tension between public access and private control is fascinating. The BID manages Union Square, makes it look nice, but who decides what happens there, really?
That's the question, isn't it? And Red Hook shows authenticity itself, the food becoming a form of stewardship, bumping up against global retail.
And the gardens, showing how even grassroots things change and have to negotiate their space.
These examples just force you to think more critically about how authenticity gets made, managed, and felt in the places we all share.
So, wrapping this up, it feels like urban authenticity isn't some fixed thing we can point to. It's fluid.
Constantly being redefined, absolutely. It's shaped by who lives there, what they value, the businesses that pop up.
How public spaces are run.
All of it. And this longing for something authentic, it really drives change, doesn't it? Sometimes good change, celebrating history, diversity.
But other times maybe leading to more sameness or pushing people out.
That's the risk. Think about those examples again. Williamsburg's coolness kind of born from neglect initially.
Right. Or Harlem's food scene changing for a new gentry.
The Red Hook vendors adapting, surviving, the community gardens as contested ground.
Each one shows it's a process, right? Creating, consuming, negotiating authenticity. It's never just there.
And you can't separate it from the big stuff. Economics, policy, media, consumer desire.
What one generation thinks is the real deal.
The next might see as totally manufactured, yeah. Which leads to that crucial question for you listening. As cities keep changing, whose authenticity gets prioritized?
And what does that mean for everyone else?
Exactly. What are the consequences?
Okay, so here's a final thought to chew on, maybe a bit provocative.
Go for it.
Could it be that the very search for authenticity, the act of seeking it out,
Uh-huh.
actually changes it? Or even turns it into just another product to be bought and sold?
Does the quest for the real ultimately transform what real even means in our cities?
Yeah, something to definitely mull over as you're walking around your own neighborhood, seeing how it's changing.